Hello, church, and hello, community. It's good to be back with you once again this week. I am on the road today, coming to you a little bit later than usual. Pulled over at this nice rest stop. It's not raining where I am. The sun is out, and it's just turned into a beautiful evening. I hope your day has been good so far. And I wanted to talk to you a little bit today from 1 Kings chapter 17. Those of us who've been reading through the scriptures on the same Bible reading plan have recently read about the prophet Elijah, which his story begins in chapter 17 of 1 Kings. And at the very beginning of his ministry, at least as it's recorded for us to read about, Elijah goes and speaks to King Ahab, the king over Israel, who is leading the Israelites astray by promoting the worship of the false god Baal. And he says to Ahab that it's not going to rain until Elijah basically hears from the Lord that the rain's going to come back. That is after Israel repents. And there ends up being a very, very long drought, which turns into a famine, a lot of suffering. God takes care of Elijah in the midst of this, feeds him miraculously with food from ravens that bring food to Elijah each day as he's hidden at a particular brook where Ahab can't find him. But then we read this in verse 8 of chapter 17 in 1 Kings. The word of the Lord came to him, that is Elijah, saying, "Arise, go to Zarephath, which belongs to Sidon, and stay there. Behold, I have commanded a widow there to provide for you." We can read that, and a lot of what's being said can easily go right over our heads. But if we put ourselves in Elijah's position, there's just some very, I would say, amazing things that God is saying to Elijah. Amazing because they wouldn't have made any sense to him. And this is why. First of all, God says to Elijah, go to Zarephath, which is to the north of Israel. It's Gentile territory. So God is saying, I'm going to provide for you outside of the covenant land of Israel, outside of where my people dwell. I want you to go to a foreign land. Secondly, God says, go to Sidon, where Zarephath is, the region of Sidon. And Sidon is where Jezebel was from. Jezebel is the wife of King Ahab, and she is the one who's led Ahab astray, and he in turn has led Israel astray. She comes from a land where Baal is worshipped very heavily. And so Elijah's told to go there. And then God says to him, I've commanded a widow to provide for you. In this time, in the ancient world, if you were a widow, you were at the very bottom of the social strata. You did not have a husband to provide for you. It would have been very difficult for a single woman, a widow in particular, to find employment, especially employment that would have paid her well. And on top of all of this, the famine has reached to this area where God is telling Elijah to go. So there's all these factors that are against a widow being able to provide for Elijah, but also just everything that God has just said to him would have been something that didn't make sense to him. Yet Elijah goes. And if you read the rest of the account, you discover that Elijah is in fact provided for, just like God promised. What I want you to keep in mind, and the reason I'm sharing this verse with you, is because a lot of times in our own lives, we don't necessarily understand God's ways. We don't know what he is up to. We can't figure it out. We don't see the big picture. We just see what's right in front of us. And so even when we don't understand God's ways, we can always do his will, because God makes his will simple. God doesn't say, understand my will, as far as understand why I'm asking you to do this. He just says to do it. It says to Elijah, arise and go, and there I will provide for you. Elijah, you don't have to figure it out. You don't have to know how it's all going to work out. Just know that I'm going to provide for you. Which leads me over to Psalm 9, verse 10, which reads, and those who know your name will put their trust in you. And those who know your name, Lord, will put their trust in you. We are a people that's called to know the name of God, which means to know who God is. We don't have to understand God. We can't understand God. Many times in hindsight, we see how things work together and how God brought all things to pass according to his perfect will and made those circumstances just come together in such a way that blows our mind. But at the outset, before we go forth and do God's will, we may not understand, yet we know the name of God, which means we know his character. We know who he is. We know that he's good. We know that he always has the best interest of his people at heart. We know that he's perfect in all of his ways. We know that he loves us, and that because he loves us, that he's going to work together all things for good to those who love him and who are called according to his purpose. We know that because Jesus died and rose again and made that sacrifice on our behalf, that we can always look to the cross and realize afresh God's love for us, that Jesus would die on our behalf, and so that we might have eternal life, forgiveness of sins, reconciliation with God. Even when we don't understand what God is up to or why he's asking us to do what he's asking us to do, don't understand necessarily his ways, we can still do his will, and we can trust God. And so I hope that encourages you today. Those who know your name will put their trust in you. Put your trust in the Lord today. And I promise that you will look back in amazement at all that God will do. Until next week, God bless.